Sue Rodriguez was very concerned about the mental and psychological stress of continuing to live in the circumstances she found herself, where she had her joints had become dislocated, she was suffering extensively from Lou Gehrig's disease, and she didn't want her 8-year-old son to see her in that state anymore. And therefore, from a psychological pain perspective, she felt it was time to end it. And I'm quite happy to talk further about palliative care and the fact the Supreme Court of Canada felt there's a very thin line between that and physician-assisted suicide. In other words, there's really not much of a line between the two in many ways.
All right, Chris. Doctor, you were shaking your head. Why?
No, Mr. Considine, I must have misunderstood you. I thought I heard you saying that palliative care was legalized after the Sue Rodriguez case, and that there's never been anything illegal about palliative care. Could you clarify?
Yes, certainly. There had been no cases on the issue of palliative care before in this country. The Supreme Court of Canada said that the palliative care is permissible and it is lawful in Canada. It was the first judicial pronouncement in a case to say that. And it said that palliative care essentially is a means by which doctors provide pain medication in order to relieve the pain for a patient. But they also know that it will hasten death. Therefore, when you give an increased dosage of morphine over a matter of several hours, you know that it will bring about the death of the patient, but you're doing it with the purpose of providing them pain relief.
Well,
there's a very thin line between that and physician-assisted suicide.
I think I see what you're getting at. I mean, it would really be a mistaken interpretation of what the Supreme Court said, in my opinion, not being a lawyer, but to say that that this in some way allowed doctors to treat patients with proper doses of medication. Doctors have always had no legal problem in Canada giving true pain-relieving doses of medication. However, through lack of education and through the mistaken thought that every time you increase the morphine, you may be shortening the life, morphine was sometimes, or other painkillers were sometimes not used correctly or sufficiently. It's not accurate to say that you know that the life will be shortened by giving adequate doses of morphine. Sometimes the person is made so much more comfortable that they actually are able to live longer. So this is more or less the, I guess you'd say, the argument tack that a lot of pro-euthanasia advocates use is that, hey, we're not really talking about euthanasia, we're talking about assisted suicide. But Mr. Considine, you're a lawyer, and you know that the first time that someone who is asking for assisted suicide is not able to lift those pills to their own mouth, there will be a court case seeking equal access to the treatment so that someone else can put those tablets in the person's mouth, someone else can give the injection, and all of a sudden we're into euthanasia. Therefore, the actual thin line, the academic distinction that won't bear scrutiny is between assisted suicide and euthanasia, not between palliative care and euthanasia. Palliative care intends to help the patient, not to kill them. Palliative care recognizes that the patient is dying, and therefore the attempt is not to avoid death, but rather to provide comfort.
This is a standard acupuncture needle.
All right.
So if someone has acupuncture, then it's very important that it's disposable needles, not re-sterilized. So it's inside just a little needle holder. If we apply an acupuncture needle, we use sterile technique, and I wash my hands already.
You're not going to do this, are you? I think he is.
Yeah. So hope it doesn't make anyone too crazy.
Okay.
That didn't even
I'm
hurt.
good with this.
This is a common...
That does not hurt you.
No, it doesn't hurt. If I reach the acupuncture point, I get kind of a buzz, a feeling. And that's supposedly the chi energy. So as the person inserting the needle, I feel it in my hand because it's a change in the feeling and the energy. And the patient kind of feels an achy, burning feeling.
You're not bleeding.
Not yet. This is a point that's used for headaches, large intestine 4. We also use that to induce labor. So there's many uses for this one. So there's some safety issues with acupuncture. Points like these or points in the neck, we wouldn't use on a woman that's early in pregnancy because it can induce spontaneous labor. So that doesn't hurt at all. But if I put it in the wrong place and hit a nerve, then that would be extremely painful.
You didn't feel that going in. There's no pinch, there's no...
When you initially put it through the skin, if you do it properly with a good needle like this, then you won't feel any pain. And when you advance it to the right depth, you feel that burning, aching feeling.
Welcome with me right now in studios, Jonathan Manthorpe, well-known international correspondent and written a book and has done so many things with his life, traveled in so many different areas. We're talking about Iraq and the upcoming constitutional efforts, put it that way, and Bush's problems with Iraq right now. Now, the war on terror, and Bush is using this as one of the key things. Listen, folks, we've got to be there. It's a war on terror, and guess what? It must be working because we haven't had any major attacks on mainland soil in the United States. I mean, we're doing something right here. So if you want to keep the course, I told you it's going to take a long time. Stick in there with me. What do you think of that logic?
Well, it sort of hangs together unless you look at it fairly closely. I mean, I think where there is a certain truth in what he says is that Iraq has become a magnet for terrorists to fight Americans who might otherwise be fighting Americans elsewhere. There's a certain truth in that.
So we take the war and we put it over there.
Yeah, I mean, this is, but you see where I think the fundamental flaw is, and I don't want to get into a whole dissertation about this, is I think there is still in the United States a fundamental misunderstanding about what it was that happened on September 11th, 2001. The attack on the States on 9/11 was to try and disengage the States from Saudi Arabia and from Egypt. It was to try and split Washington from its support for those regimes. It was peripherally an attack on the United States, but primarily it was a way to try and get at the Saudi regime and the Egyptian regime. And the concept, I think, that America as such is under threat from these terrorists is a misunderstanding about what their objectives are. Their objectives are the Muslim holy lands of Saudi Arabia and Egypt. And America was getting in the way of those objectives. And so,
You're saying it was much more political than it was anything to do ideological.
Well, it's ideological and political and religious, but it is not anti-American. It is pro-Islamic, anti-Saudi, anti-Egypt.
Through experience and through training, we have people who have taken upon themselves to have the position of trying to decide what are the most important things that people need to know each day.
And that's an awesome responsibility because you're determining what sound bites people are going to hear. And those sound bites are going to influence a whole lot of people on that issue.
Yeah, and I think reporters are more and more cognizant of that. I think the old way of doing things where the reporter would stand back and try to be so objective as to be ridiculous, that try to pretend that they had no feeling about the story whatsoever, is gone. I think reporters now understand that what they say and the sound bites they choose do influence the way people think.
And the tones and inflections and all of that, yeah.
Yeah, and it's foolish to think otherwise. So I think that there's more of a trend to advocacy journalism, certainly in television. And I think that there's also an understanding that, the best stories that are told are ones that maybe do generate a little bit of emotion and try to get a point across.
All right, we got a lot to talk about. Any questions? 1-866-NOW-TV10. I'll be back with more right after this break, and we'll take your phone calls. 1-866-NOW-TV10. Well, I'm back with Steve Burgess, an avid traveler and journalist who's experienced more of the world than most of us ever will. You've had some crazy times traveling, haven't you?
Yeah.
By the way, you're looking very thin.
Yes.
Looking very thin.
6 episodes of food poisoning in 2 years.
You're kidding.
Two in 1 week in Vietnam. That could have had something to do with that, experience, the feeling I had about Vietnam. No, twice in 1 week. Once in Hanoi, and then hours after arriving in Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City. I ate a cob of steamed corn. Now, how do you possibly get food poisoning
from steamed
corn? Yeah. But I managed it.
You've been inventing ways to
I've
do
been
that.
inventing. I am forging new ground in the.
Out of the travel experiences you've had, what's been over the top? What has been really crazy in your mind?
Oh boy, well, I mean, fresh in my mind right now is I was just in Morocco not that long ago. Boy, that's a hold on tight experience. Just hang on for dear life and try to make your way through. That's a crazy experience.
What do you mean by that?
You go to Marrakesh and you go to this big square called Place Jama Al Fana. Sounds like a sneeze, but it isn't.
I'm impressed you can say that.
I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it is. I mean, you have in the center of it, you have these huge open-air kitchens with the smoke rising, and you have sheep's brains, but also lentil soup.
You try that?
I went for the lentil soup. Thank you. And then around the outside, you've got the fruit sellers, the fruit juice sellers, and around outside them, you've got the medicine men and the soothsayers and the snake charmers. And the place is full. It's not just tourists, it's locals. You've got the medicine men they've got their big ostrich eggs and Lord knows what, and they are, they've got
Ostrich eggs?
I didn't know what it was about. Like at first I looked and there was a crowd and I was looking, they had these big ostrich eggs, and I don't know what the beneficial effects of those were supposed to be, because all the pitch was in Arabic. But they had the big brilliant blue robes, and they were making the case for whatever unguents they were selling, and then you got the snake charmers. I had a guy drop a snake around my neck and photograph.
What kind of snake are we talking
A
about?
sleepy snake. Luckily, it was
Like a boa constrictor or something like that?
I didn't know what it was. He had a cobra that he was doing the little snaky dance with his flute. But then his helpers came and dropped some kind of green water snake or something around my neck. I don't think
You let them do that? Or they just did it?
It sort of happened fast,
Yeah, that would be a freaky thing.
That was, yeah, it was, and then of course they demand money from you for the experience, and they demand 200 dirhams, and I ended up giving them 30 dirhams and leaving quickly, and then afterwards thinking, should you be shortchanging a man with a cobra? That's maybe not such a
How well trained is that snake?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think the snake was anything to worry about, because at one point the guy's playing his flute and he had to reach over and smack the cobra a couple of times to wake it up. So I don't really think.
I don't know if I'd want to wake up a cobra or not.
No, exactly.
Welcome back to Online. Tonight, the voice of the BC Lions, Rick Ball, is with me. We're talking sports. We don't get an opportunity to do that too often.